All right, everybody, this is Professor Diffley, History 103, Module 2, Chapter 1. This is lecture video 6. Again, there's more lecture videos in this module than there are in others. I usually try to keep it around 3 or 4. This one is just a large chapter in the sense of there's a lot of basics that we have to cover here that's set up and help us understand later, so it takes a little longer to get through all this. So again, just bear with me on that one. All right, so this we're picking up language, right? I left off here. Evolutionary milestone. Why? Ability to communicate, right? Much easier than just trying to gesture or try to draw something. But this is important. Why? Because it allows knowledge to be passed from one generation to the other. So not everybody has to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, right? You could pass on your knowledge, your experience. Now, how phonemes, right? So these are sequences of words, right? This is how we can create different words, create full coherent thoughts, sentences, paragraphs, that sort of thing. Where did it come from? About 80,000 years ago, you have the Kung of the Southern Africa and Tanzania offer nearest approximate examples of this proto-language that survives today. This is a click sounds. An example of these sort of proto-language, click languages, as they're often called today. It's part of one of the required videos. I actually added it while I was doing this. And it looks at it by PBS, and it looks into the San Bushmen, some of the oldest known continuous hunter-gatherers who still use a type of a click and other sound language that is different than any other language that most of us speak today. And so you can see an example of that there. You can see here, it's still used in Southern Africa, Tanzania, other places. And again, why is language and art so important? It's dynamic engagement. It allows us to represent different concepts and ideas, different than the animals have language, right? They communicate with each other. Like I said before, we know whales and dolphins and other mammals, birds. They all have, obviously not mammals, but they have different sounds. They can communicate with each other. So that is a form of communication. Human language is different, though, right? It is much more complex. And that's what you start to see here. So moving on, and again, here's some of the original language family groups that you see around the world. And most of the click language is also the Cochin here, and that's what the video will talk about there. And you see these different ones that change, right? The Indo-European, that's what we speak today. That is what many of the languages, like English is. Spanish will derive from that. Obviously, Spanish is the Latin language, comes from the Romans, but, where did that language come from before that? Beginnings of food production here. So this is where, again, humans began to adapt and change instead of where they went from hunter-gatherers to farmers to sedentary peoples. The argument is that as humans began to roam around, they found areas where food was more abundant, more berries, more fruits, more vegetables were growing, more different types of grains were growing. And what they began to learn to do is to cultivate these wild grasses, cereals, and domesticate animals, right? To control it so they didn't have to hunt it. How'd they do this? It is a form of genetic modification, and I know everybody's, anti-GMO, but, all food is somehow genetically modified, right? How? Well, they chose the animals that produce the most milk or meat, something like that, and bred those, ate the other ones. They only planted and bred the plants that gave off the most, yield, that sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. Now, where does it happen? All over the place. Southwest Asia, which really is Mesopotamia, what we call the Middle East today. You find it in China, parts of Southeast Asia, which would be like, today's Vietnam, places like that, Mesoamerica, different areas there, Northeastern America. You're going to find it all over. And this map, which comes from your text, shows these areas where you begin to see cultivation, all at different times. And so the idea is how did it spread? It's unclear. It is probably human migration in some areas, but then you get in the Americas where there is no connection. People just develop this. While you find that a lot of times when inventions are sometimes happen at the same time different places on the earth, even though people aren't talking to each other. Why? Well, humans are looking at and trying to solve the same problems and then come up with the same solutions. And so that's not all that extraordinary here. But again, you can see these different areas of food production, what was grown there at different times, and so. All this to, the production of food is the Neolithic Revolution and the origins of human civilization. So what's the Neolithic Revolution? Well, it's the new Stone Age Revolution, which is the invention of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the consequential changes in human society that go along with it. So domestication of animals. This is after humans probably domesticated dogs first, but they don't use them for farm animals. It was probably sheep, lambs, and then moving up to pigs, and then cows, right? Start with a smaller, easier controlled animal and moving up. Consequent changes, they began to live in these places constantly, right? They settled down, they built communities, they were no longer nomads or semi-nomadic. But there's also negatives to this too. Right, they're eating a less varied diet, so they don't become as, they're not as healthy. They're not moving as much. The problem is now that they're close to animals, lots of human diseases, devastating human diseases coming from animals as, right, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And many of our, they jump the species barrier, right? The coronaviruses, they can come from other animals. They get passed from bats to other animals, and then we get it. But yeah, whenever humans are around animals, there is a chance of getting these worse viruses, right? Like you have swine flu, you have all these different bird flu. Why they called those things? Because they came from those animals first. So there are changes, but that's the Neolithic Revolution, invention of agriculture, domestication of animals, and the changes that result. What leads to this climate change, right, is the end of the last ice age, right? Began to melt. It's milder in temperature, and it's rainier, right? So it becomes warmer for longer. There's more rain. Why is that helpful? Well, it helps things grow. Food, right? The growing seasons are longer. There's longer summers and springs and harvest times, that sort of thing. And this is what we talk about the farming package here. This is, they often go hand in hand. Domestication of animals and pastoralism combined with agriculture, right? Pastoralism is what it really means is the taming and keeping of farm animals such as sheep, pigs, and cattle, or what people, first domesticated and then began to breed for certain traits and then began to, utilize, right? So think about it, those three animals, sheep and cattle, you can use their hides for, leather. You could use sheep's wool. You could use their milk to create dairy. Then you could eat them, that sort of thing. And so this is what you begin to find. And this really does change human existence. Now, again, this provides humans with a much more stable food supply, but a less varied one. And like I said, it could also lead into, other negative impacts. Dogs, why? Dogs first. What were the uses? Protection. They have different senses than us. It's a symbiotic relationship, right? We both give each other, their warmth at night too, things like that. In the Zagros Mountains of Iraq, the wild sheep. And then you would have them. So what you would have is you would have herders, right, who would move around the grassy areas, the steppes, to be able to graze their sheep. But then you would also have the farming, right, the settled farming. And so pastoralism and settled farming go hand in hand, right? They both provide each other something that they need. So the herders would trade with the farmers, and then pigs and cattle are domesticated later. Types of pastoral. So let's look at these. Transhuman pastoralists. Your book used transhumanists means semi-nomadic pastoralist. Again, they are the ones that move in a circuit, right? They move in the same area according to seasons. Your text uses transhumanists, so that's what I'll use. But transhumanists equals the semi-nomadic. And again, this is another point where I said take a look in your note in the note sections there. I provide that there. So let's get back to this. And then the other ones are nomadic ones, which are obviously nomadic. They're moving all the time. Large areas they would move across. these are steppes. Steppes are elevated grasslands, you can, especially in the central Eurasia. There are parts in Africa as well. And they're usually horse riders, right? Why they could move over longer areas. What's the historical importance of them? Well, one, they're going to be drivers of change, right? They're going to have, you're going to see over and over, is often a conflict between the nomadic or semi-nomadic peoples and the settled groups, right? The nomadic groups are usually had been historically better at warfare. They're often gonna, they're gonna fight over resources. They can invade things. Why else are these horse riders, these nomads, so important in human history and historical importance? Historical significance is another way I'll often ask this. So why is something important? Not just why it happened or what happened, but why and what does it mean? Historical importance, they connected, large regions, right? So they were usually the way knowledge could flow over long distances, right? They also adapted to a different lifestyle, so they borrow and trade from each other, but they could spread these ideas. Why is the horse so important? Something we're going to see. Horses obviously give you the ability to pull heavy objects, carry things, speed. It's also, it's an advantage in, warfare back then. And horses also, as they are today, they're expensive and there's a lot of care for them. So having horses were like, having cars, right? A family car or multiple cars, they sign a prestige as well. And again, here's just some more on the Neolithic Revolution here. I for some reason provided it twice here, but just some different images there. It really goes on there. So what changes to human society? This is it. Really, again, permanent settlements, increased numbers of births of children. Why? You have a bigger food supply, but also more hands on the farm is helpful, right? It really is. Impact on health. We start to get all sorts of different types of arthritis and others. I mean, you can see by the farmers here, they're bent down over often. So if you do the same movement, you're hunched over over a lifetime, it will create a hunchback, that sort of thing. So it creates impacts on health. Again, less varied diet is a problem. And like I said, the diseases. And also, right, if you're relying on one food source, what happens if that food source fails, right? A bad harvest, a bad crop. Well, yeah, it only ends badly, to say that way. Where did farming begin? Again, what we call the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, in between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. What is in mostly today Iraq, into Turkey, Syria, that. But this is most of the, we're going to see over here, this area over here, the Zagros Mountains. These are going to be the first human civilization, first cities, first city-states, first civilizations, first writing, everything. And we'll talk about that more in the next in the next module and all that. Again, this is the birthplace of this, Mesopotamia there. You can see some of these ancient cities, earliest city-states, earliest empires like the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians. And again, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates there. In this area, that is where you see the first of all of this there. It's just a close-up of it. Taming two rivers. Now, what's interesting about this is, this is a very arid region, very dry. However, they have these rivers that, so, and if you can have irrigation, right, you can bring the water to other areas. You could, you can grow more. Problem here, though, in Mesopotamia, and we'll see this as a difference with Egypt, is damaging and unpredictable floods. The floods were not, in Egypt, you have the Nile River, which floods every year at the same time. Mesopotamia, you never know when it's going to happen. And so that can be damaging. So they had to come up with ways, and that's was irrigation, right, to channel the water constructively in these places. You start to see this irrigation, it increased food supplies because you can bring water further from the banks of the river. And it also man-made channels for the water helps with flood control is what that did. And so, today irrigation is done usually, at least here it's done with pipes and things like that, but it could be simple as a ditch, right? A channel, an irrigation ditch, that sort of thing. They start to domesticate wheat and other things that you can see here. Starts off to how they change over time. again with bigger yields, right? And these are the things that they begin to there. These are early depictions of farming from Mesopotamia. Some of the earliest depictions we have of it. Again, here's some more on irrigation. It's also one of the earliest known maps we have, and it's mapping out who owns and who uses what field, who maintains the irrigation ditches and irrigation system. And that's what these lines here are, irrigation, the areas in between are farmlands, things like that. Just some more of where agriculture, how it's spread out. And again, that's in your text. You're also going to see this in Asia as well. Melting glaciers lead to environmental changes. The Japanese islands form, right? They're cut off from the mainland. You have river basins and lakes. This is one of the videos. Why do they grow up around water, rivers, river basins? Well, again, water is important, right? Obviously, we need it to live, helps things grow. You're going to see this in the Yangtze and Yellow rivers here in China, what is today China, and this is where you're going to see the first real agriculture and civilizations in Asia there. They're growing rice and millet. But again, a lot of technology, pottery, what's pottery useful for? Storage, right? So now we could have surplus food and we could keep it. Yeah, we can keep the food for the next season. We could also store the seeds to grow in a future growing season. All right, that's the end of this video. The next lecture video will be the last for Module 2.